Hi, this is Zen Gardner, and you're listening to Raconteurs News. Don't miss it.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. It's Thursday evening. It's Thursday the 19th of May, and we've got a pretty good lineup for you tonight. I'm hoping you find it interesting and informative. And tonight, as ever, I'm joined by Jason Holmes, my co-host. Jason, how you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, Andy. It just seems such a long time since I've sat here doing one of these shows, because our Tuesday night one was pre-recorded last Friday, so it's almost a week since we've been. Well, it is a week since we've been actually live on air, so I've been missing it a little bit. So glad to be on again.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, that, isn't it? The shows seem to creep up really quickly, and before you know it, even though we only do 2 a week at the minute, it's kind of, where did that week go? But then when you have a week we're not doing one, you're kind of twiddling your thumbs and wondering what the hell to do with yourself. But yeah, we're here now, and this evening we'd actually got 2 guests lined up. I know in the event calendar we'd only got Shaun McGee lined up, but tonight we're supposed to be having Jimmy Hagan joining him. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to get hold of Jimmy just yet, so hopefully we'll drag Jimmy in as soon as he appears. But welcome to Raconteurs News, Shaun McGee. Good evening, Shaun.
Hi, mate. How's it going? It's good to be here with you both. Yeah, and I was talking with Jimmy. He's going to probably be popping along a bit later. He has his little chores that he has to do around this time of day, so he's no doubt going to be dropping in later. He's just going to give me a bit of support. So that's that. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, great to have you, Shaun. I think it's the first time I ever spoke to you. I mean, we spoke to Jimmy a couple of weeks ago, but first time I spoke to yourself. So how's about you? We start off by you introducing yourself and letting us know what you're about.
Okay, well, I'm no really big shakes, but I do sort of stuff in the activist community. I'm kind of known as an anti-nuclear activist. I also do stuff to do with pollution, other stuff, and sort of cover other things like the Gulf oil spill. And I have been for about sort of 6 years or so now. And as I've been digging into investigating that scenario and then Fukushima, it just seemed that the same corporations kept appearing, covering it up, minimising it, and cutting the costs for the insurance companies, damages and things. Mm. So I've along the way, obviously, I realised, and I think since 2011, I was based in London at the time, that the sort of press sort of went quite downhill. There wasn't quite as many good sort of what they call it, sort of investigative journalistic programs like Panorama and Dispatches. They seem to be getting fewer and far between, and the topics seem to be a little bit tamer.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, concerning the particular industrial incidents that I was particularly into, I realised that they were quite quickly covering up these sort of major information. Sometimes outright lying. It was quite amazing, and also able to see how the whole media around the globe could be controlled. The story around the media could be controlled around the globe. That was quite a revelation. That a story could be just switched off. That's in mid-flow with lots of clicks, and then all of a sudden there's just nothing there for anyone. And it happened to a lot of people, and we all rushed off to, there wasn't many places to go, but we rushed off to a few blogs on the internet and tried to find out what the truth was, the term of Fukushima or the BP Gulf oil spill. And indeed, all that activism, all that truth finding is still going on now. There's whistleblowers have stepped forward. But anyway, we're still trying to get the message out to people to say that these industrial accidents don't go away. Bhopal is still causing disabilities. Chernobyl is still causing deaths and disability. And of course, we're seeing that with BP Gulf oil spill, and we're also seeing that with the Fukushima, and we'll see that in the future as well. Also, one thing I noticed, the way that they control media generally, it's not just the media, but the whole social media platform. It's quite a thing to see, and it can be used in many other ways. And a bit later on, maybe I'll talk about the Pitchford Inquiry and maybe its implications on the Scottish referendum. A lot of spies messing around, and in Scotland during the referendum, and in the Pitchford Inquiry, they've made Scotland a separate issue to the Pitchford Inquiry. They've been excluded. And the same thing in Northern Ireland as well. They've been excluded Northern Ireland from the Pitchford Inquiry. So that's that. Anyway, that's just generally sort of who I am. I've been blogging, I've been social mediaing, I do research for various NGOs. I think that kind of sums up what I do in a simple way.
In case I missed that, because I was just typing something, but could you explain to me what the Pitchford Inquiry is? Is it Pitchford? Did you say Pitchford Inquiry?
Yeah, Pitchford Inquiry, Pitchford Inquiry. And that, if you Google that, you'll come across a website, which is the main one, which is run by the Justice Departments. And then I'd say also type NETPOL, Netpol, who are an NGO that are overseeing and on the other side of the Pitchford Inquiry, trying to call for the rights of the victims of these spy cops. You know, and some of these women, some women were made pregnant and then dumped and left, and the police had gone back to their wives. And that's just one example. And a bit later on, I'll show you how far the Pitchford Inquiry should reach. It should be actually Europe-wide and indeed include Iceland. And I have some breaking news about the Iceland spy cops issue. But anyway, I'll tell you now, actually. We recently interviewed Birgitta Jonsdottir, who's the head of the Pirate Party, or representative of the Pirate Party in Iceland. They, after the recent Panama Papers, had quite a surge in popularity, and but obviously the powers that be, like they have in Ireland, have quashed the left sort of dissent and have managed to sort of retain power for now. So basically, when I was talking with Birgitta in this interview with myself and Jimmy Hagan, we basically sat there, and she said that this guy, PC Kennedy, who'd been in Ireland throwing stones at the Gardaí in Dublin, and doing many other things, including getting women pregnant in England, basically he turned around. He was trying to get into Iceland. So I just got a little update now, which is that it was Iceland that he was trying to infiltrate. And of course, Birgitta Jonsdottir is one of the founders and supporters of WikiLeaks. So you can see how far and what sort of reach these spy cops have had into societies, and you can only imagine what games they were pulling during the Scottish referendum. But is
this Kennedy guy? Is this the guy that infiltrated, I think, some green environmental protesters, and I think somewhere near Radcliffe power station in Nottingham, I think, at some point? Is that the same guy you're talking about now?
I don't know about the Nottingham incident particularly, but put it like this: the head of Bindman Solicitors, who is standing for the victims in the inquiry, they've basically turned around and said that, look, we're only looking at 6 spy cops. We're only allowed to look at 6 spy cops, but there are 160 spy cops, which would mean that, in theory, there isn't a group in the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, probably even in Europe, who don't have some spies connected to them, because a lot of these people join more than one group as well, and they get really involved, and they're paid to travel between and all the rest of it. So But anyway, Byman's solicitor said that just 6 of them, including Kennedy, had done so much damage. He wondered how much damage the other 154 approximately spy cops. And of course, we don't include Special Branch, and we don't include MI5. They are Special Branch. We don't include other sort of departments in the police force. So in my case, it might be the British Nuclear Police, for instance, or one of the other departments that have similar surveillance and unlimited powers, if you like, to do what they do.
Didn't this
just
this
one
Kennedy
second,
character?
Jason.
Didn't he become a whistleblower?
Sorry, just 1 second,
Right.
Jason. And Shaun, sorry to butt in there, but it appears Jimmy's turned up. But due to the limitations of the wonderful Skype, we're going to need to restart the call. So if I just play a little jingle for a minute, and we'll be back shortly with Jimmy, if that's okay. Hiya, and welcome back to Raconteurs News. This time we've got 2 guests with us. We've got Shaun and Jimmy's joined us. Good evening, Jimmy.
How you doing, Andy, Jason, and Shaun?
We're doing great. All the better for having you along for the ride, mate. Sorry, I did interrupt you there, Shaun. You were just about to give us an answer on this Kennedy, the spy cop.
Okay, well, PC Kennedy, he was obviously one of 6 spy cops that actually did get onto the Pitchford Inquiry. And an interesting point to bear in mind is that these are the guys that got caught out. All right, these are the ones that got caught, and so they're not whistleblowers. Their whistleblowers were basically the people they worked with. So what happened was that the Pitchford Inquiry, one of the problems that they're seeing with it, because I'll be talking about I won't be talking about a particular case. I'll be generalising about a case that's in the High Courts at the moment, where surveillance techniques are being used to disrupt it. And in the Pitchford Inquiry, what we're seeing, because it's an inquiry, is we're seeing that they're not allowed. The Home Office's Theresa May has said, we're not taking Scotland into account. We don't want to take Northern Ireland into account. We just want it as small as possible. And one of the big bugbears that Bindman Solicitors has is that the actual amount of police that should be on there, and it should be, the whole of the spy cops thing should be looked at. But the police are saying no, they can't because of operational reasons. And if you don't know who they are, they're not going to tell you. Okay. Which means 154 spy cops are doing their thing in various groups, maybe political groups, environmental groups, could be anywhere. They'll be stirring up trouble. They'll be trying to get protesters to be violent. All the sort of techniques that you would imagine that they've been trained to do. So in turn, and also of course information surveillance, and breaking up groups as well as another thing. So we've got these 154 guys roaming about. The Pitchford Inquiry can only look at 6 of them. Kennedy was one of the guys that got caught out. He got a woman pregnant. She saw a picture of him, realised he was a copper, turned around and said, right, you've got to go back and, we're going to look at this, and brought it to, and the people in the Pitchford Inquiry, have been fighting, up to decades, So I would say just go to the Pitchford Inquiry, go to Netpol's site, type in Google Netpol and Pitchford Inquiry, and that will take you to a lot of articles that have been spread around the web by social media people at very least, informing you about exactly the sort of people that are in this inquiry, and people that should be in the inquiry that have been excluded as primary witnesses. So I was going to myself be a secondary witness, which means I was just going to put a letter in saying the stuff I'm going to be telling you today, what happened to me. I was going to just put a statement of fact in, and I was told to stop because that they weren't allowing privacy issues. So there was a lot of issues there. So that's how that sort of worked out. At the moment, I'm kind of on the fence. We're hoping that it will be expanded. We're hoping that the Pitchford Inquiry will see sense, but it's not looking good at the moment. But people are still trying.
Yeah, well, that's. I'm just sorry. I'm a little bit fixated on this Kennedy character because I'm sure he came across as he was portrayed in the media as a bit of a whistleblower and somebody that was a bit of a hero. I just wanted to know we were talking about the same guy. Physically, if you look at the guy, he's got something wrong with his eyes, where his eyes look sort of outwards rather than being cross-eyed. They look the other way. Are we talking about the same guy?
I have to say I haven't actually noticed that about him. It's Mark Kennedy. Okay.
Mark Kennedy, that's the guy. Yeah, that's him. Right.
So hang on, I'll just read out a note I got because myself and Jimmy, when we were interviewing Birgitta, she mentioned it because we were talking about the Pitchford Inquiry, and she just mentioned it briefly. But a friend of mine, Martin Lowe from the UK, he said that he'd talked with Birgitta John's daughter. I'm paraphrasing, about this issue while in Iceland last year. One of the things she told me is that Mark Kennedy penned a report about just how bad the Icelandic policing was on an action he was on in the country. So he was actually over there in an action, and he also tried to contact Birgitta John's daughter to try and, infiltrate that. So he was trying to infiltrate like a few groups, just one guy, a few groups in Iceland. Now, there are issues with Iceland, like the UK wants to flood Iceland with hydro dams, ruin all the environment, and pump the hydroelectricity miles and miles all the way to the UK, which is going to lose a lot of energy, but for them it's free anyway. But for the Icelandic people, it isn't. But anyway, that's a story we've been covering on European News Weekly, myself and Jimmy. So, at the end of the day, that's an update, and it clarifies that it was Mark Kennedy. It's the same guy who was throwing stones at the Gardaí, getting pictures taken, which would get on and then they'd be saying, oh, look, these nasty Irish people. And they're actually English policemen who were throwing rocks at the Irish Gardaí. You can't make it up. And, of course, now we're looking at, well, what does the Irish Gardaí know about this spy program, and are they cooperating? So did someone in the Irish police actually say, yes, Mr. PC Kennedy, go to there, throw rocks at our police, we'll take some pictures, or get the journalists to, and Bob's your uncle. Thank you very much. You can go back to Iceland, UK, France, or wherever with a job well done. And bearing in mind, there's another 154 of these guys. We're only talking about one. The other 5 have caused mass carnage and pregnancies and all sorts as well. So anyway, that just gives you an idea of the type of people who are being recruited to do this spying. We're not talking about people with good characters and morals. We're talking about people using any means necessary, very special branch, very Sweeney, very MI5, very military. So that's my viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, could I just interject a small little bit here, Shaun, just to put a little bit more perspective on this rock throwing fiasco that was going on in Dublin, and that was just basically the reason why he infiltrated that particular group was so he could gain credibility in activist circles here in this country. But the overall objective was to, from there, move on to the Shell to Sea protests, basically, which were happening over on the west coast of Ireland. I don't know if you're wise of the Shell to Sea protests going on there, basically. At Belling, what's the name of the area, Shaun? Belling something. God, I can't remember. But
I forgot myself. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, the whole thing about the rock throwing in Dublin was just so that he could gain notoriety and sort of infiltrate activist circles. So that the overall objective was to get to the Shell to Sea protest, so that you have a bit more credibility when you arrive there. So I think that was the overall objective there with that Dublin rock throwing thing,
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a bit of a double bubble for them, isn't it? They also get to see somebody throwing a rock at, the Gardaí, and let's be honest. I've been in Ireland in protests in Ireland, and they're the most peaceful, family-orientated things going. It's part of the Irish Constitution that you can gather peacefully to sort of push against. In Limerick here, we had about 10 police for 3,000 people. I wouldn't be surprised if the Gardaí weren't actually in the crowd, but not as undercover police cops. They probably had the family with them and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's amazing, isn't it? One guy we're talking about here, and we haven't covered all of his operations. We just talked about the ones that we know off the top of our heads.
Do you remember talking to Bukita, right? And then she mentioned the name Mark Kennedy. Did your antenna go up like as high as mine did when she said that? Right? That was totally unexpected to hear that he was up as well, and it just the extent of how far these guys get around Europe is just unbelievable, really.
No,
you'd imagine that the British police force would sort of have their limit of jurisdiction in England. Basically, what we're seeing is they're
Hello, are we there?
I think we've lost. Oh, Jimmy, you there still?
Yeah.
Oh, you broke off a little bit.
Oh, okay. Where did I break off?
Sort of 5 seconds.
Oh, okay. Well, basically, what I was just finishing off there saying was it's quite amazing how the remit of these British police spreads all the way around Europe, and that's just what we know of. Like, it probably goes further afield, because we've also seen interesting stories coming out about some of the characters involved in the security operations on Shell to Sea, and also having activities down in Nigeria, was it, Shaun?
Yeah.
Where you had these sort of like these Shell to Sea security guards. They're more or less mercenaries, and they're working in all these different locations. They were caught out in South America. Actually, that's where they met their doomsday, was down in South America. But these guys are just flying around the world and just causing mayhem and leaving a trail of destruction, and under the guise of security officers. It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, and when we're talking about destruction, we're talking about the oppression of small communities, like in Louisiana. Sort of like the sort of thing that's going on in Fukushima, with the psychological warfare going on in the local population, whether that's driving around in vehicles with black windows, or intercepting phone calls, or putting CCTV cameras up so they can spy on everyone. And it's quite that we obviously Shell to Sea. We also saw people actually getting physically beaten up and property damaged and what have you. So, but that's part of the course for this, and that's part of the thing that we kind of try to fight against. We want more corporations that are more sort of beholding to the people.
So that gives us a bit of a concerning dilemma, I think, Shaun and Jimmy, in that we hear so many people in this, for want of a better word, truth movement, saying we need to get together in larger and larger groups, when in reality we probably serve our purposes working together in a lot more smaller groups, because once you get into a larger group, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to be infiltrated. Wouldn't you say that's the case?
I would say it's the other way around, actually, in some respects. It's the smaller groups that get infiltrated. That's why they've got 160 cops. Now, one thing to bear in mind, that's in the UK, right? We don't know how many spy cops there are in Ireland. We don't know how many spy cops there are in Iceland. We don't know how many spy cops there are in other countries. Yeah. So, I mean, the determination is, are these UK spy cops something that is unique to the UK? And do the UK sell their services to corporations and governments abroad, in Europe? Is that part of the service that GCHQ and all these JTRIG and all these others do? It's an interesting question. We know that the security services in the UK are well, according to Edward Snowden, are the most efficient and nasty on the planet. So we could expect probably the worst case scenario there. But who's to say there isn't a group of 20 Irish Gardaí who do spy copying and maybe they go to the UK, and maybe the UK ones come here, and so on and so on. They interchange. Maybe we have French, German, Icelandic. I think in Iceland it's a little bit more problematic for them because there's only 300,000 people, so they have to bring in foreign spy cops because the locals know half the people, they're related to them. It's a more difficult situation. You need that's just some thoughts I've got on the spy cop thing anyway.
Mm-hmm. An interesting thing came up though in our little stint there last year on research about spying and electronic spying, Shaun, where we found out really that Britain does the spying in America because they're not the American NSA is not allowed to spy on its own people, so it hires in guys and girls from England, and they can get away with it there because there's probably some sort of like jurisdictional sort of type restrictions going on where say British spies can't be sort of like apprehended and sent over to America for trial and vice versa, because we also like American spies are coming to England to do the spying for GCHQ and also probably in Ireland as well. So this is probably something which is going on, like where say the reason why British police are being sent to Iceland is because the Icelandic police can't do it, and if they did, they'd probably end up in jail if they're caught out or something, God knows what. So there's obviously something strange to that effect going on there jurisdictionally.
It seems that they're using any and every method available to them to circumvent their own laws.
Yes, no, definitely. That's definite, yeah, however you look at it, yeah.
Yeah. I believe, Shaun, you wanted to talk about how you've been affected by these particular issues yourself.
Well, okay, well, for me, it sort of came on two levels, really. So first I could turn around and say, well, what do I do? So I do research, I do, and I'll give that research to NGOs that it's useful for. So, for instance, I think in the early days I was sending a lot of links and from the UN, meetings from the UN to do with Fukushima, and I was sending that stuff direct to Japan to various NGO groups so that they were updated and they could get the news out and translate it into Japanese. Also, there was real problems getting people to translate from Japanese to English, and the few that did were being targeted by the Japanese Secret Service and various other organizations. So basically, they had to sort of stop what they were doing, and then there was lesser people doing it. And eventually, I think in the UK also cracked down on any translators that were doing Japanese to English anti-nuclear sort of translations. So there's a whole story with that for me, but that's kind of the way that all worked. There's kind of different levels of manipulation. So the first one really generally is to do with social media and problems with your internet. You don't quite know what's going on. So basically you'd have problems with an email. Did it go missing? And so on and so on. But in reality, they can do that a little bit here and there, take the odd email, you wouldn't notice it necessarily or realize what it was, give you problems with your phone or your internet, I don't know, that kind of thing. And then there was another level, so basically the next level would be what we'd call a more overt surveillance. So, all right, okay, I'll kind of go through the things that I went through recently. Right now, things are a lot better than they were when I was in the UK 2 years ago. I'm in Ireland now, okay? And Ireland, for all its faults and weaknesses or whatever, it has a good human rights background. And for every sort of capitalist, sort of corporate-loving person, there's also somebody who's doing some sort of human rights sort of activism, So Ireland isn't, and it obviously has some sort of history. So obviously priorities in Ireland aren't necessarily bloggers from the UK. They could they'd be more likely to be with people that are picking up guns and bombs and stuff. So it's kind of a good place for a journalist to be to a degree. Having said that, journalists have been targeted over here, but that's another story. Anyway, so now I would say that recently I had my Facebook, so going back 2 months ago, my Facebook was getting blocked. I was trying to report on the Atlantic Alliance, who are trying to target all left-wing groups at the moment, but the right-wing groups will follow later. But they're trying to say that they're all pro-Russian sort of thing. So that's the excuse. And so I was getting PayPal, Facebook posts just totally deleted. That was number one. Other things we came across over the time, I was doing some blogging on Naomi Wolf, who's a writer in New York and activist. And she put up a thing about, what was it? It was a Guardian article about Lee Rigby and the Woolwich attacks. And it was looking at what was going on. And of course, the truth seems to be that it was a botched security sort of plan. They were going to set these guys up, do something or whatever they were going to do, get to spy on their communities or whatever it was. And it went a bit pear-shaped. And anyway, the Guardian did an article on it. It got posted onto Naomi Wolf, and I realised that it had actually been blocked in Europe. So nobody in Europe could see on Naomi Wolf's PayPal page. Sorry, not PayPal. Naomi Wolf's Facebook page. They couldn't see the actual article posted, and I could because I had the direct link to it, but I couldn't see it when I looked. I got loads of people from America and Australia and Europe to check it, and anybody outside of Europe could see the post on Naomi Wolf's post, but anybody in Europe, it was censored. And this was about, was it 2 years now, a year and a half ago. So this was the sort of thing that has been going on with Facebook, and I just kind of persevere with Facebook because I link with people directly there, so it's not, it has some uses still. Yeah. But as I was saying, I was having actual posts deleted live off multiple pages that I was posting on about the Atlantic Alliance or NATO. So that was number one. And I had a little bit of problem with Twitter where I like and share a post. It wasn't going to my Twitter feed with me. So I had stuff like that. That's minor. I don't mind that stuff, really, compared to what I had, which I'll go through in a bit. Mm-hmm. Annoying thing that happened recently is I had PayPal, I had an email deleted, which meant that I lost PayPal. It got sent back after 5 days. I got the email telling me it got sent back, but I didn't get the email saying that somebody had sent me a donation. It was only €10, but the bottom line was it was like it got blocked. But there is a kind of reason for that, because I've sort of been involved with Professor Chris Busby and the British nuclear test veterans case in the High Courts. So basically, we were, obviously I've heightened my profile a little bit, and the powers that be are spending a little bit of extra effort and on sort of managing me a bit. So I went to the UK. I was there for some week, and I had my mobile. It was actually 3 full days. They switched my mobile off. But there's a bigger story there, which I shall come back to at some point. But anyway, I can't talk about it at the moment because there is a High Court case going on. So, but let me just tell you that if you haven't checked up on Snowden's revelations, type in Snowden, JTRIG, Intercept, and read all the stuff there, because they use that stuff and they use that against activists, they use it against groups, they use it against anybody they want to malign, break up, disrupt, or block. Anyway, it's all there on the intercept.com. So that's kind of some recent things that happened to me. I would say that that's over the last 3 months. Now that's basically on the internet, and very little is happening to me in Ireland with that. Now, if we were to sort of go when I was in London, now let's have a look and see when I was in London. That was the good old days, and had all my tax paid up. I had 10 years no claims bonus on the motorcycle. I was a courier, delivering blood and what have you. So I had my landline was initially intercepted when I was making an outgoing call, and they pretended to be one of what they thought was my employer, which, funnily enough, was the Daily Mail newspaper. And I was doing some subcontract work as a courier. So I got a crime number for that, and then it turned out the police, I was saying, look, if it's the police, I don't mind. If it's a private corporation, I want to sue them. So basically, they turned around and they admitted it, and through my local Twickenham police station, so that I knew it was them, they said, yes, it was us. And I said, fine, if it was you, fine, but don't do such silly things again, you don't need to. And that was it. And I thought that was the end of it. And then a bit later, I sent an email to a nuclear scientist in the UK, so-called health scientist, and I got hacked that very night on my Vodafone mobile online, and I got a crime number for this as well. And what they did, they actually hacked my online account. Like it's as good as your bank account online. Yeah. Well, somebody actually managed to hack it, get in, check it out, and then come out, and then they hit 3 wrong passwords just to lock it up. Which was just a bit cruel, but anyway. But that's what the Vodafone guy said, and they had the IP address. I found out 5 months later from a Vodafone employee in India that they'd actually closed my investigation down by the Friday, by the end of the week, and opened up an investigation on me. So that says a lot about how that works in the UK. Anyway, other things that happened in the UK, I had my insurance cancelled by a text. Now, I'm a courier with the blood, right? So I got home, took out my mobile phone, and lo and behold, I've got a text saying my insurance was cancelled an hour earlier. So that was great. Anyway, I phoned them up, tried to sort it out. They wanted 300% increase. All right. Now, Aviva, who are my insurance company, also insure nuclear power stations. They've got a really good deal where they, you get loads of money and they've got very little liability. So basically, and they were also invested at the time. They were invested in about 350 billion into the UK nuclear energy market. So obviously they decided to give me a good kick in. But also in the insurance company, they hire ex-MI5 operatives. So that's why you get that voice, the truth machine. They can tell by your voice if you're lying or not. Mm-hmm. That was an MI5 guy who advised that for the insurance companies. And you can type in MI5 in insurance, and you'll see various big names coming up, and certainly small names would be there as well. But Shaun, yes, I'm only halfway through the list.
All right, I don't want to deter you from this list, but what would you say to? I'm somebody that's had similar things happen, and when I reel them off, I sometimes think to myself, God, these sound really exaggerated. What would you say to somebody that said that all these things are just coincidences, just things that are happening, and you're building them up and being paranoid?
Okay, well, there is 2 crime numbers to begin with, so that's kind of a bit of evidence there. That's number 1. Yeah. Number 2, for some of these things, I've got witnesses, like professors, one witness to some for my phone being blocked in Ireland, for instance. Emails encrypted. I got an email once from riseup.net, because I obviously discovered another time when my encrypted email got got hacked and a load of other people's, and they sent an email saying thanking me for spotting the vulnerability. I've got that email somewhere. The PayPal thing, well, I was going to video that, but it's easy to delete an email, isn't it? So from my end, so it wasn't particularly good evidence. But the fact I didn't get the money, it probably says something, What else were you saying? Insurance going up 300%. Well, that happened. That could be found out within a Freedom of Information request. What's it? So what was the other one? Right. Okay. So that's going on. Right. So there was the phone interception. Well, you can't imagine that if somebody pretends to be. See what it was. I was working as a subcontractor for the Daily Mail. So when I went to what I did actually was I was paying a phone bill. Paying a parking ticket that us couriers often get now and again. I was paying it at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning, just before I was going to work. So I picked up the back of the ticket, phoned up the number on the back, and it rang. It answered and it said, "Oh, this is the Daily Mail. How can I help?" Daily Mail reception. Now, I know the guys on the Daily Mail reception, and that wasn't him. So basically, I was like, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" And what it was, they were just trying to freak me out to let me know that they knew I was working with the Daily Mail. And a bit later on, they then got me the sack from Daily Mail. I was still employed by this Mail on Sunday, but the big piece of work I was doing for the Daily Mail got dropped. So that was just to give me a bit more punishment, on the finance side. But anyway, that's that. So I'll go through a few more here. So as I said, there is evidence, FOIs and what have you, and there is a lot of it. I had 2 computers taken out. Don't have evidence of that. One computer just got trashed. The other one, I did actually see the cursor go to the program. It clicked, it went up, and then I quickly switched it off, switched it on, and then I got a message saying I had to reinstall Windows because the registry was corrupted. That was a Windows 95. And both those computers were taken out within a week, just after the 2013 expansion in Cyber Warriors at GCHQ. So they were just practicing, I think. Internet getting switched off, mobile phone getting switched off. Well, as I said, I have at least one recent. I have another person who is in Wales that also experienced the phone switching off, and also had a friend. I phoned Chris Busby, it was, and from his landline, I picked up the phone, made the call, put it down. He picked up the phone to make a call, and the phone was blocked for 24 hours. Later, I was to find that they block it for 24 hours because somebody has to. They put a black box in the exchange, and that's done 9 to 5. So, if at 5 o'clock that you come to the if the security services think, oh, what's this number? What are they doing? We need to know what they're doing. They put you down for a black box. It gets switched off until 9 or whenever the next day that the black box is fitted. So, and that the black box is something that the cyber network was all talking about. When I was in Devon, it got quite interesting. It got much more malicious, actually. I had to move out of London in the end, obviously. I went down to Devon. I was living in a van. And it worked out quite well for about 8 or 9 months. I was doing a lot of blogging, a lot of researching. I was doing research for various UK NGOs, anti-nuclear crowd. Discovered some interesting facts and all this kind of thing. And then in Devon, I had my mail. My mail got tampered quite seriously. They really were on the case in Devon with my postal mail. I had it delivered to a charity because I had no address. So they were witness to that. It's a main charity in Totnes, homeless charity in Totnes. There's a church on the high street there. Internet sims, I used to go through those. Oh my God, I used to save them because they'd block the actual, if I was doing a good blog or whatever, they'd just knock off the internet. And I was in a van. So what I do, I just take out the sim, put in the in it, and it worked. So I knew that sim had been blocked just, A bit later on, if you save that sim for a week or so, wait for another block to occur, put that sim in, it would work, So it seems when they do blocks, they have to unblock. It's quite important for them to do that for some reason. Right, so mobile.
So do you think this would just because a lot of this is just it's just simply things that are just going to cause you hassle? Do you think that's all they were trying to do, just disrupt you, stop you from getting in the flow?
I think what it was basically, I'm an effective, let me think, I would say probably an effective research. I mean, say for instance, while they were trying to keep the Fukushima thing quiet, this is just one little thing I did, and it wasn't a big thing particularly, it's just an obvious thing that nobody had thought of, was that when the nuclear stuff was piling out of Fukushima and kids were being kept in place, I contacted Child Rights International Network in London, and I said, do you know this is going on? And they said, oh no, our Japanese activists haven't informed us, and I said, right, okay, well, I said, but we can only put it up if you've got peer-reviewed articles or mainstream press. That's the only thing we can let people know what's going on. So I said, fine. This is like probably a couple of months into the Fukushima disaster, so they weren't made aware of it. So what I did, I just got some articles together and this is when articles were thin on the ground, but there still were articles asking about health for the children and issues. So basically, I put that out, and then basically that went to 4,000 charities around the world. So I would have thought that and that's just one little thing that I did. There was other things I did. I was contacting Japanese activists direct. I was working with UK activists, and but there was a lot of research. My area was digging into files, reading boring PDFs, going onto the UN website, reading that. It's all the things that the journalists used to do, but they don't anymore. It's the boring stuff. And they're not allowed to anyway, because they just get their cut and paste press releases and they'd go with that. They don't tend to go onto a UN website. And in the UN website, I found a lot of stuff gets hidden in various tricky ways, but that's another story.
Mm-hmm. Just a comment come up there in the chat room that I'd like to read out to you, and I echo this comment myself. Tony's just posted in the chat there, big respect to Shaun for keeping at it. Many would have given up. And I mean, I haven't actually been in the same room with Jason, but he's reported to me some of the things that happened to him, and he says to me sometimes, he says, I don't like telling you all of this, because he says people just think I'm mad. And do you find that people do think you're a little bit bonkers when you start talking about these things? Because
well, I think the effect with the family was probably and friends, they go, whoa, but the thing is that I've done an MA in psychology. Mm-hmm. I was working with the police, with young people, on behalf of young people, as an advocate for young people. Mm-hmm. Worked in various legal and various charities working with disabled, what have you. So, and I've been, I've been thoroughly checked out by, Richmond Council, sort of, what they call it, the health department. I can't remember the exact term for it, but their health department that checks out all the workers, occupational health, that's it. Mm-hmm. And so basically, I had a good write up actually. They said I was one of the most stable people dealing in very difficult circumstances. So I suppose in that respect, it's people think I'm bonkers. Yeah, well, even my family and friends did, even after my history that they were more familiar with. But I think, as the Pitchford Inquiry's come along, as Edward Snowden's come out, as Julian Assange has come out, as this information is now out there, it's not being processed properly by bloggers, in my opinion, but it's out there. And when we look at it, I think you'd be the conspiracy theorist to think there isn't this stuff going on. Now, of course, there's the big thing with overt surveillance and covert surveillance. They can do so much with covert surveillance. They don't really need to do overt surveillance, but it is a tactic to try and stop you doing what you're doing. And I have to say, and I have known people that have stopped doing it, not because they weren't brave, but because their personal circumstances, they had family or close family they had to look after, and all this kind of thing. So they had to back down, and I've seen bloggers. I've seen quite a number of bloggers who I've worked with very closely, have had to step down, and activists as well have had to step down because they're worried about the possible future ramifications of where this technology would take us, what laws are being brought in, how will they be used in the future, is thought crime now on the cards? Are we talking about that? And certainly, when we're looking at JTRIG to do with Edward Snowden stuff, JTRIG are the Ministry of Truth. They can manage and angle and do what they like. I'd like to join them, actually. It sounds like a really exciting thing, but I don't know if I'd have the conscience to do that. But wow, isn't it amazing to have all those like a Smurf they can put on your phone, and they can control your phone completely. It's just like a press of a button. They can switch off your internet. They can Google your whole life, which is which is converted onto digital letters. It's quite amazing. So, I mean, for me, really, am I a hero for carrying on? Well, I was lucky. I was really lucky. I was brought up in Ireland and England. I jumped between the two. I was able to fall back to my Irish heritage. I'm entitled to an Irish passport. I can rejig my life. Not easy at 50, but at the end of the day, for me, it's a better alternative than staying in the UK. I couldn't operate. I mean, I went there for a week, 3 or 4 days. I couldn't even use my mobile. It got switched off. And the guy I was with was going, that's really weird. And it got switched on the morning I was going back to Ireland. So I knew when I was going back. And they switched it on. And that was lucky because I was able to make some urgent phone calls then and find and sort out some problems that had cropped up in the meantime. But the reason they switched it off was, I can't explain that at the moment. It was connected to other hacking that's going on in another place. And, but once again, it's like, I think as we go along, I am noticing that some of the stuff that was happening to me that wasn't happening to other people is now, some of the low-level kind of covert stuff that's happening to people, and some overt stuff is happening to people. And if people are being particularly, if they're being particularly effective in the area that they're that they're looking into, they're researching, then they might start getting the overt stuff as well. But it's interesting. It really does make you wonder how the hell people like David Icke and that can carry on, because there's just no way. If I couldn't live in the UK, literally, I can't make a phone call, can't go on the internet. It's just really oppressive. Coming back to Ireland, I was just like, put my feet up and I cracked open a can of beer and I just said, "Wow, it's nice to be back." And,
people like David Icke have got they've got the protection of publicity. People know who they are. If they simply went missing, now I can understand. It's a real shame, but I can understand somebody who's blogging, perhaps having a limited impact, but still blogging some really good stuff. I can see why they would stop that activity if they just got a single warning, just a little warning, because if they've got families and things like that, it is difficult, and that it doesn't show us. It doesn't show that the people that are doing the blogging that are having to give up, that they're weak. It just shows that how strong this system is, and what sort of enemy we're up against.
Well, see, the thing is that with all the social media stuff, before I carry on with this, because it's kind of paranoid, this, right? But I just want to just inject a little bit of solution here. And the bottom line is, you're saying what keeps you going? Well, to be honest with you, there's been quite a lot of people high-profile blogging on the internet, and we've been having this discussion, and it's like, well, actually, if you're aware of what they're doing, then you can come up with other ways around it, or you can double check your post when you do a Facebook post to make sure it's getting there. There's little things that you do just as a matter of course. So being aware of this stuff going on is number one. right? And then also talking about it encourages other people who are suffering from this to talk about it. Now, I know there's loads of scientists and things that don't talk about it, and high-profile people and journalists that don't talk about it for a number of reasons. One is the one that you're saying is where they could be frightened. There could be a whole series of reasons why they don't, but it just does happen. So as a blogger, I've been thanked for doing what I'm doing. And I'm only one of a sort of a large army of bloggers. Who get the information and share it out there. And what point being really is that if we're aware of the system as it is, we can fight against it, and we can look for information that will enlighten us to what's going on. It's like you get interested in something, and so for me, I think really, yeah, okay, they can do some really nasty ass stuff, and they don't even have to get off their butts. They can sit by a computer and just do it all from there with maybe a phone call. Well, they've got a phone on the computer probably, so they can do it all through the computer. And it's it's like drone striking. It doesn't really matter who this person is. Let's just hit them.
Yeah.
So the real worry is that, but see, the system itself is then designed to be sloppy. This is the bottom line. So they're going to overreach this. They're going to overextend. You're going to hear little stories, and you do, but they're just like bits of the story. They're never put together, But as people are becoming more aware, they can put these little bits that they hear here and there and say, "Oh, that's relevant to this spying shit," and then that's relevant to how the impact is on me. I think there's with the argument with Snowden and everything. I mean, there's a conspiracy. That he's like a shill and but that guy left a £70,000 job in Hawaii with his surfboard, right, and went to Russia, right, and he was looking. He was definitely looking if he got caught. Longer sentence than Chelsea Manning.
Life in prison.
Well, and a lot of torture as well. They'd have made a real sort of, because they tortured Chelsea Manning as well. So basically, it's they want to do that with Julian Assange, So it's like the reason these people do what they're doing is because it's like, and the reason I do what I do as well, because you can see a profound change in society if we don't challenge what's going on. If we don't waken up, we don't turn the TVs off and start doing a bit of research and then talking to our neighbours, and getting conversation going, because at the moment, there's people like me or Jimmy or you who are trying to say this or that or the other, but it's we haven't caught the mainstream. Apparently you need 6% of the population for the whole population to know something. In terms of how J-Trig and all these things work. It's like a numbers game. They get us down to about 3 or 4%, maybe, or less. But say 3 or 4%. 3% is kind of an average of a small group of people doing something. So that's the bloggers around the world. But they can keep them down there. They can stop that expanding. You can go up to 4 or 5%, and then they can shut it down, make it shrink again. It's very much. And the normal news cycle just distracts people constantly,
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, it's like going for the actual things that are causing problems and saying this is a problem, let's do something about it. And when we have that conversation works its way up the intellectual scale as well. And maybe they will have that conversation. But that's how we do it from a grassroots perspective: is to inform and then to disseminate.
Well, I think we'll probably get into what we can do from a grassroots perspective in the second hour. I think we're right at if we go into full Richie Allen mode, we're right at the very top of the hour. So, Andy, what do you reckon? I think we play a record about this time, don't we?
I reckon that's the worst Richie Allen impression I've ever heard from you, Jason. Pull your socks up, man. You usually do way better than that. But yeah, that's so far,
I think it's copyrighted, guys.
Yeah, it's got to be, hasn't it? I can't say it's the top of the hour.
Okay, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
You're listening to RaconTeursNews.com. Stay tuned for more untwisted, unsweetened news. Please consider buying a t-shirt or making a donation to help support us. Thank you for your support. We do it for us all.
And welcome back to Raconteurs News. It's Thursday evening with myself, Andy Young, and as always, Jason Holmes, and our very special guest this evening, Jimmy Hagan, and Shaun McGee of European News Weekly. Welcome back, guys.
All right.
Hello, guys.
All right. So, anyway, this is hour 2. So, where did you want to go with this? Because
what we were going to do is we were going to see where you wanted to go, because you're the guest and you're the one with all the information. So, why don't you take us where we should go?
Well,
that's like, you've done your research, lads, huh?
We don't do research. I've been at work all day.
I've been working all day too, so I was hoping to maybe I can get some questions. So, anyway, look, I think if I open up with this one here, you were saying there, Shaun, about how cushy it's been since you moved back over to Ireland, but you did actually have some really interesting shenanigans going on with your electricity, right? And I was watching.
Still am. I just got a bill for €1,000. Right.
Another one.
Another bill. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jimmy, you could have fed us that question during the music break, and then we could have asked it.
It's not that interesting, actually, that one. But to be honest with you, it's I tend to think it's probably just down to the lackadaisical approach that the Irish have to business, which is kind of good, I think, actually, if that is the case. So I wouldn't really put my tin hat on that one, really, and I've got it covered anyway, so I don't care. So, but I have to say, I think the only thing I did have a little bit of mail tampering, but that I kind of reported it and then it stopped. But then I was getting my mail about 2 or 3 hours after everybody else, which was interesting, and that only went on for a few days. So now I'm not sure what's going on with the mail over here, but the thing is, in the UK, they would actually block the mail. They actually held on to one letter for about 3 months. About 3 or 4 weeks, and then hand delivered it on the Saturday.
Yeah, I've had experience of that. I've had my mail comes, particularly if it's anything other than a bill, I'll get it sort of like 3 or 4 weeks after it's been posted, rather than bills just come, boom, 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 boom.
I don't know what the deal is.
I've had experience of that. I know that happens.
I don't know what the deal is with the post office. I was talking with somebody in America, and they were saying, well, actually, because in the UK, they could sort of peel your letter off, and in theory, they could X-ray it, and then they can fold it out without opening it, so they can actually read it, a folded piece of paper that's written on, without opening the actual letter. That was one bit of technology that's is out there, basically. But whether they would just divert the whole letter and then save it, and then the guy from GCHQ comes along or whoever and takes them away or as a read through them. They usually have. I mean, I noticed that they do have seem to have like a police liaison officer at Vodafone. So they have and they obviously have a technician who puts in these black boxes on on the exchange at BT and stuff. So basically, there's people closely working with these telecom agencies and generally. So, but that's that.
How many of you end up getting all your mail? Basically, most of it has already been opened and just taped back up like sellotape. That, guys?
Yeah, sometimes they don't even sellotape it up, do they? I mean, sometimes they just leave it, and it's as if it's been wet, especially if it's been raining. It'll just be open.
Yeah, I get that quite a lot. Unless it's a bill, of course, they're never open. But anything else usually has been opened. In secret, it's been opened.
Just obviously, the opening of letters is such a small bit, really, isn't it? And The Tories have decided to bring in the counter-extremism bill, which was mentioned in the Queen's speech on yesterday.
Yeah, doesn't that include thought crimes?
Well, no, they've already covered thought crimes. They're going on to covering up the illegal stuff they did before now. So, put it like this: I got hacked and I left at the start of 2014. So it was about April 2014. I left London 2013 after a lot of pressure to leave London. And then basically what I did, I was they turned around and they were basically in the end of 2013, in December 2013, they had a commission that looked at spying on citizens in the UK, and they came up with the very bland and undetailed point that the security services had been doing illegal stuff up to 2013, December 2013, but this was in January 2014. This report, it said, but now they're not. So a couple of weeks before the publication of this statement, right? They basically only just stopped. They say, and of course now with the counter-extremism bill in 2016, that just closes the loophole. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Because technically all the stuff they've done from 2014 to now has been illegal as well. So they've got to kind of put a cap on it so that it doesn't, it's not just an ongoing sort of abuse of the surveillance system, which is exactly what it is, So it's kind of, but anyway, that's, so anyway, the Queen seems to be quite happy with everybody being spied on, which is probably all right then.
Well, yeah. And living in Ireland as an outsider looking in, what do you make of the what's the coverage like in Ireland of the EU referendum, and what do you make of it, and what's going on?
All right, let's get topical, boys. So all right, well, I would say I'm going to sort of start off with the fact that I've got two kids in Norway. One of my favourite things to do is to jump on my bike in London and drive all the way to Norway without showing my passport and letting any fucking know where I was going. I'll go to my daughter's door. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I did that twice, so there was no problems. Okay, so with that in mind, I would say in Ireland the sort of the European issue, the Irish tend to use Europe a little bit more, but in my opinion, not enough. The courts and the lobby, they don't use their lobby power, and so the lobby power is left with the corporations. Now the complicated bit is that the activist groups that are able to combat the corporate lobbyists, are actually in Europe. Okay, largely, right? Mm-hmm. So apart from maybe Right to Water in Ireland here, who have actually used the European system to make a point about their the right to water, instead of the corporate right to water. So basically, they've made that, and the campaigns here, it's kind of official, it's recognised in Europe, and now there's a lot of things going on in Ireland which they're not using now. So there's issues with sort of Gardaí, the police over here, and instead of just sort of going through the procedures, making the changes, it's this whole painful thing where one lot shouting at another, and they try the Irish courts, and the Irish courts are kind of not the place to go. They want to be in the European courts, but so for me, I would say the English bit of me is saying that we really need to stay in the EU, because the people that are fighting the lobbyists and TTIP and all this kind of thing are in Europe. There's much less. They're much weaker in the UK, whether it's right or left paradigm. They're much weaker. Now, because of that, if we were to leave, what would be left? Well, everybody's on about TTIP at the moment. Now, in my research, TTIP has already been brought into, the rules of copyright and everything. They're being brought in. already. The Secrets Act was changed in 2014. Nobody was told about that, but it supports copyright of all public material. So anything the government does is now copyrighted. You can't share it, in theory. In theory, you've got to contact the government and say, can I share this important PDF to all my friends, and have to wait for a response? And they may say no. So at the end of the day, that's already happened. All this stuff with trade, and it's already happened. The easing off of pollution in the environment, that's already happened on land, in the air, in the UK. It's been happening for 2 or 3 years. Nobody's noticed it. Okay?
I suppose you can see the effects of that, Shaun, with what was going on in Spain there, and they seem to be more aggressive, I guess, in their stance towards the sharing of information between activists and on the internet. What do you think about that?
Well, Spain and the UK are doing the same thing. In Spain, they've made, if you have a riseup.net encrypted email, you can be arrested for it, and they're trying to do that in the UK now. They're trying to say you can't have encrypted emails. Can you imagine that? Right? So it's like, but that's part of this counter-terror extremism bill is just to put the final nails on the coffin on anything that's privacy. The government now want and when we say the government, we kind of think of little old men or ladies, doing a bit of knitting for the war effort, and checking things out to make sure that the Hun doesn't overrun us. But what it is really is a lot of young men. A lot of them are coming from the army because they've got the security clearance, and they're put in front of a computer and basically allowed to just look at anybody's, look at Edward Snowden. He said he could go anywhere and look at anything. If he didn't like someone, he could pop over and check them out, and he could do worse, So that's kind of how that works. But, anyway, I just, I would say with Brexit, with if you go down that road, what will happen? See, the thing is that it's a complicated one, because also the UK is going to be in charge of NATO in the Baltic region, right? On behalf of the US. The US is going to have the Ukrainian end of it, and the northern part of the Western Front is going to be basically run by the UK. All the Lithuanian, Latvian, and Polish and everything, that's going to be under the command of UK forces. And the UK have to increase, I think it's 3 brigades, is that 3,000 people? 3 brigades in Eastern Europe, so they have to expand. And of course, we've got Afghanistan expansion and this and that. England isn't too far away from conscription at the moment. That's a fact. So, but anyway, so Brexit. I think Brexit for the UK would ultimately be what the Tories would really want, because they'd have complete control in the UK. I would say the US, from their position, they're going to be dissatisfied because at the end of the day, they need the UK to be part of Europe, to be in charge of the European contingent of NATO forces. You see what I mean? There's a lot of money in this NATO forces now. There's a lot of tax money being sent there. The UK has to spend 2% of its GDP on these arms as a requirement of the NATO package. But obviously they're going to have a lot of clout. They're going to be big in Lithuania and Latvia and all this, and they're going to probably, English business will benefit by stripping those eastern countries of the rights of minerals and water and all the things they're doing in the UK, basically. So I think the Eastern Europeans are in for a bit of a surprise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the in and out of EU is really, I think you need to stay in it because of human rights. And activists need to get more focused on using the mechanisms in Europe to lobby against the lobbyists, the corporate lobbyists. So does that sort of kind of answer your, give you an impression of where my headspace is with this?
Yeah, you're in the stay-in camp, along with the people that say, we need to stop him to protect human rights, and that I can see both arguments. And to be fair, I don't really have an in or out. I don't have an in or out opinion at all. My opinion is that it's going to be what it's going to be, and that's already been set. So.
Well, let's look at a scenario. Let's look at the scenario where right-wing forces take over in Europe, Ukraine and Turkey, and they all kind of get their visas and they travel to to other parts of Europe and become politicians. And anyway, if we get that kind of scenario and the media getting much more right-wing and the left-wing in Europe being much more attacked, I would then say, let's get the fuck out of Europe and, batten the hatches down. And we'd be pointing little guns at England and all that kind of stuff. And then, you guys would be pointing little guns at us and we'll be saying, keep away from our water aquifers, you naughty English people. And, so that's kind of a possible future. But at the end of the day, at the moment, the way things are, we're too interconnected. I mean, how much stuff have you bought from Europe for your motorbike or your car or for the house or the project you're working on? If you're getting a mobile phone, did you buy it from Germany? Did you get a pair of motorcycle boots from Italy? Do we want to turn that stuff down? And in fact, actually, on the internet, for people, as long as there's not too much interference from the tax men and the VAT men and things, is a great platform for people to sell things, and from a market perspective as opposed to a supermarket perspective, where I can sell you this pair of boots, and you go, wow, that's a great pair of boots and really cheap as well. Thanks a lot, and I've made some money, and you've gained a pair of boots. I think that sort, we haven't had to go through the middleman, had we? So I didn't have to sell my boots to someone for an even cheaper price, and you didn't have to go there to pay more for the same product, just so that some people in the middle can make some money. I love that stuff. I really like that, and I think ultimately that might be the way, because we're looking at Europe, but I'm sort of looking at globally. Of course, how do we rein in powerful and the greedy? That's the big question, isn't it?
That's the big one, Shaun. Yeah.
I think that we have to sort of take a look at Europe started off as EEC, which was known as the European Economic Community, and I think, in my own personal opinion, that it's actually a sound idea. This free flow of goods and services that one can provide on a sort of on a European perspective, and people can share, and there's basically this free flow of markets so that people can exchange and trade with each other. I think that was a brilliant idea. I think the EEC has gone through a few different sort of incarnations over the years, and the last incarnation was the Lisbon Treaty, basically. Now, there was an interesting case brought there in the courts in Ireland recently with Harry Ray. I don't know if you've heard of Harry Ray, but basically, on the first vote here in Ireland as to whether we enter into the Lisbon Treaty or not, there was a unanimous vote against entering into that particular treaty. Now, the government wasn't really happy with that. They came under a lot of pressure from Europe because the people voted no, and it went to a second referendum, basically. So we had two referendums on the same topic, but there was a few little changes made to appease the people, basically, and see if we can pull the people in and get a yes vote, and they got their yes vote. Now, Harry brought a case to the courts quite recently where he was challenging basically the assumption with the European Union that they can interpret the Irish Constitution, which the Irish Constitution is basically sort of like, who has the authority to interpret the Irish Constitution? Does the authority to interpret the Irish Constitution sit with Brussels, or does it sit with the Irish courts? Now, they actually got a judgment in that matter, basically. Now, Europe obviously wanted jurisdiction in being able to interpret the Irish Constitution, but I think the High Court ruled that no, the only court that can interpret the Irish Constitution is the Irish court system, basically, the High Court of Ireland. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, that was a great victory, in a sense, like, because we're seeing that there's a lot of really, really good things about being in Europe, you know, and I would hope that England wouldn't leave Europe completely. I think they should stay in it, but it needs to be reined in a sense, like, because while there's a lot of good aspects to Europe, as Shaun says, like the human rights aspects, you've got the higher courts there, who can sort of like, if you can't get remedy in your own country, that you can bring it on to a higher court in Brussels. And I think that's a really, really good thing, personally. But there's also other issues at play here, which is the sovereignty of the people and the people's right to determine the laws and legislations which they want to enact in their own countries. So I think it's important that, like, we have these higher structures which may be able to provide remedy in matters where it can't be solved on a smaller basis, say here in Ireland, through the court system. And it's great to have that extra opportunity to possibly find remedy in a higher court.
But don't you think that's a double-edged sword, because that just gives another opportunity for any opposition to just delay things?
Well, if you look at it this way, what is justice? And justice is this court system where we make decisions based on facts or evidence that's placed before us. So I think if we have that sort of thing going on, and it's running well, it's okay. But I think what we're seeing, you know, I find, is that politicians are not doing the best for their countries in Europe. You with me? So it's like, I don't think that many politicians think much about Europe. My own personal opinion, and you know, and all the complexities that are going on. So, you know, the failure, I think, is with the national politicians not bringing up these issues and working to sort them out, you know. And sometimes we see they do. I mean, the vote on TTIP was a classic, you know. They did a vote on TTIP, it failed, and they sort of stopped it, and then they came back again. They were going to do this final vote, and the opposition to the TTIP discovered that if a certain amount of these MEPs got together and all propositioned a vote, that they could stop TTIP in its tracks. And of course, the person who the chairman of the meeting got wind of this, so he actually stopped the meeting just before they were going to say the actual words. The guy stood up to say the words, and he stopped the meeting there and then, right? Because otherwise TTIP would have been blown out of the water altogether. And then this is documented. You know, you can see it on a video on YouTube. So at the end of the day, it's like, you know, there's the pros and cons of everything. But if we're looking for, as small people like me, you know, I have to look for justice elsewhere. So I'm looking at the Pitchford Inquiry as possible means to get my story out there and warn people is number one. That's one reason I'm doing it, is to say, look, this is what they can do to you, you know. And if they can do it to certain people like me and various others that they've done similar things to, blocking credit cards they've done to other people and other things, and making £60,000 disappear from the banking system is another one. And that think about that for a minute. That actually happened. Something managed to make £60,000 disappear out of an account, basically in transit from one account to another, made it disappear absolutely completely. Nobody knew where it was, for hours. And then eventually, because of the stir that got caused, it turned up. But the bottom line, just popped out of the ether. So, when we're looking at what they can do, it's, what happens when they widen their remit a bit and say, well, look, we've got rid of all the sensible ones have left the country now, so we can't spy on them in the same way. So how do we use this amazing technology that's so easy to use, and they've got all these guys trained to do it? So what happens? You find that you're being tracked and traced, and if you owe money for your TV license or whatever, or this or that, they can use so many different things, against you. And if you don't have a TV, you don't.
They can stop you leaving the country basically now if you owe anything.
Yeah, totally. There was, they stop you coming out, even going to Ireland now. You get stopped, and it's that everybody's name's being tracked, and basically they're sort of just making sure that nobody's fleeing the country and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's really unbelievable, but it does mean that poor people. I mean, there was a situation which is still going on, I suspect, where there's a charity or a group that help families escape the UK who basically are disabled, and social services want to take the kids away. So there was one situation where a woman came over to Ireland with a family, came over to Ireland. Both parents had disabilities. They had the child, and the Irish social services kept an eye on them for a while to see that everything was okay. But the report they did in the end said that this mother was better than most of the other mothers because she's just so conscientious and methodical, And so basically, they actually took them off the watch list. She was that good. But in the UK, they wanted to take the kid away. Now it's for them to get away, it's really difficult. I've been there. It's not easy to just up sticks and move to another country. Some have gone to France, and so where there's better human rights. This is this human rights thing again. And so basically they go to these different countries, but sometimes like an extra 20 quid might be the difference between you getting out of the country and not. So you don't want all these huge costs that are going to be lumped on top. And if you owe money, if you're being shot, on the social benefits, and they want to take your kid away, and you owe your TV license, you can't get out of the country. I mean, what's that about?
Yep.
That's fundamentally stopping somebody's human rights, but the thing is that when I came over here, I said, right, I'm going to get my own back here. I'm going to do a report to the EU HCR in Ireland against the UK law, saying that they're not doing their job, and they're not abiding by their obligation under the European human rights sort of category. This is in 2014. So I contacted them, and they just turned around and said, well, look, the UK is a signatory to this, so therefore we can't investigate them, right? So there is a kind of a bit of a weird one in the EU. If the UK left the EU human rights could then investigate the UK. But if you're in the EU, you can't be investigated. And I sometimes wonder if that isn't why Cameron isn't really stressing out. Can you imagine the EU investigating UK human rights at this stage of the game, with like refugees in horrible camps run by fucking big corporations and all this kind of stuff going on? Austerity, homes being sold, social cleansing, all the things that are going on in the UK. Which were, it's part of the reason why I left 2 years ago, because I could see the writing on the wall, and it's going to get worse. I think, unfortunately. I'm still waiting for the kickback, the British people to rise up and say, look, but the interesting thing there is that there's a right-left paradigm, and people, the arguments, they come up too much, and the single point things that we need to agree on, to make changes on, like austerity, homelessness, all the basics, the health service, and all the rest of it. These things that we need to concentrate on. That's a solutions thing. Somebody's got to come up with some strategy to get right and left working together. And that will take a group getting all the little groups together. So it will be technically a big group, so that you get the punching power. It's hard to say who that would be. I think we have to look at the UK, who does the biggest sort of demonstrations. But that would be for people to look at, and maybe get them to organise right-left demonstrations, on single issue projects.
We have got a couple of we've got a couple of comments from the chat room on the issue of human rights, Shaun, and Mithrin's saying that the Human Rights Act is no loss to the British. The reason we didn't have a Human Rights Act before is because the Human Rights Act is based on pre-existing British law. And also Susie comments that you've still got to carry a passport in Spain if you're an expat and re-register your car for €1,000, etc., etc. I know what Susie's saying there is fact, because I lived out there myself for a short while and ran up against those same issues myself. So,
well, Spain was a fascist country up until a couple of decades ago, and it seems like it's heading back that way again. I know there's pushback, but anyway, good luck to everybody in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Tough times ahead.
I think it's tough times for us all. And I mean, regards to Brexit, I mean, we got a leaflet through the letterbox today. I know there's quite a bit of outrage about £9 million being spent on emailing every household in the UK to tell them how they should vote. And that was government money was spent on that. Well, there's a bit of a conflict of interest there, I think. But we got one today telling you how you should how to vote in the coming referendum, and it's disguised as a leaflet telling you how the procedure works, but inside it, I just looked briefly through it, and there's a big long list of reasons why we shouldn't leave the EU. And I'm thinking, government are charging us for our own for their propaganda that they're sending to us. I think that's
but who's sending that? I mean, see, the thing is, all this stuff is done by a PR company, so you wouldn't know which way is up or down in reality. If you knew all the intricacies of what goes on behind in some respects. Somebody like WPP LLC, they were probably behind, and various other, Idlemans and all the others. Were probably behind how the Scottish referendum was lost, plus a load of spy cops doing their thing, and we've seen it. You've got Ireland; they voted against water and austerity, and they've got the same bloody government back again. How does that work?
Well, it's because democracy doesn't work, does it? Democracy isn't democracy. Democracy is whoever's counting the votes. That's who decides who's going to be in charge.
Yeah, well, obviously, but I mean, what's always worked before and what is effective, and it's not always effective, but it's effective quite a lot of the time, is mass protest and strike. These things are the I mean, to be honest with you, I was reading about BDS the other day, boycott, divest, and for Israel, and I was looking at the report they did, and they said the pressures of BDS, and also the fact that they've got to automate some of their workforce. So a million people are going to lose jobs in Israel. Plus the BDS has sunk in, and it's like they've got really bad economy, very bad employment, a huge gender pay gap. So all this kind of stuff's going on. But you don't get to hear about this, But the boycott, BDS, is being made illegal. They're trying to make it legal, or trying to make it demonize it. But the reality is, it's just being really successful. and it's really, sort of bringing to the table, in the same way it did in South Africa, the issues of apartheid in that country. So ultimately, I mean, the only obvious choice for Israel is for it to become one country and be represented by Palestinian and Israeli in the government.
Yeah, it's not likely to happen. That is it. Nowhere near it.
Well, you say that, but at the moment, we're looking at Israel going completely and utterly broke. In no time at all. I mean, it's only been pumped up by other sort of economies that are, pumping themselves up. So, there's a lot of issues around the finance as well, obviously.
I think Jason though about how they got these leaflets through the door, information packs, or was it Andy, and explaining how you should vote. I think we've seen something similar here on occasions in Ireland, on the vote for in or out of the Lisbon Treaty, basically. Now, what gets posted through your door is a very, very watered down version in what probably the politicians would call the layman's terms of the treaty or the proposal, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, you're not getting the full information. No. Now, the problem is, I think, that people are a little bit lazy and won't actually go and read through the official documents if they exist, right? I don't know whether they exist or not, but if you're dependent at the end of the day on a watered down version that's going to be coming through your letterbox, which you could basically sort of call propaganda, is that not the problem? People are a little bit lazy and won't actually go and really look at the issues that are at stake.
Yeah, of course that's a problem, but this problem has been created by this political class, which has made sure that education's been sort of dumbed down to the point where it's just training, so nobody can think critically, and people think that things that come through their letterbox are real, are true. And think something that comes from the government they'll think is real and true, simply because they've been conditioned to that. Now, for the Conservatives to be exploiting that for that to be the issue is one thing. But for the Conservatives to exploit that, because they know that the people the majority of people that read that leaflet aren't going to have the critical thinking skills because of the education system that the political class has put in place over the last 30, 40 years.
Well, that's very, very interesting, because I listen to a lot of American radio, and a lot of radio stations which sort of talk about American constitutionality, about the American Constitution and the likes. And a lot of the time they draw comparisons about the education levels of the people from today compared with the people of, say, 100 or 200 years ago. Where
I'm not sorry. I just want to interrupt. I'm not talking about education, because education is a completely different thing to what we get now. We don't get education at all. We get training. We used to get education. Education has been critical thinking, and being able to solve problems has been replaced by just complying and ticking the box and giving an answer that is within the criteria that they've been indoctrinated into.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of like what I was getting, where a lot of constitutionalists from the states who talk about these type of topics will say a lot of the time people were so well versed in the law, in reading and critical thinking, 100, 200 years ago compared to now, where people are sort of like oblivious, and a lot of people can't even read. Mm-hmm. And don't understand, and won't research, and it's kind of like a sign of the times, really. We kind of like, we're in this kind of like what we would consider ourselves to be an advanced culture, advanced race, but at the same time, our critical thinking, our ability to research and to sort of like take a look at the information that we're being fed is very, very diluted. We're not really very good at it compared to the people, say, 100, 200 years ago, who would have been sort of like, this stuff would have been hammered down their necks until they got it, like.
Yeah, I read an interesting article. I don't honestly remember where it was. It was only a few weeks ago, about literacy levels in the USA and how they basically plummeted since the Rockefellers hijacked the education system to turn everybody into obedient robots. You've gone from basically 85% literacy level, I think it was, down to something way below 50%, and it's getting worse all the time.
Well, I mean, it's all right, the education system generally, it's like, I mean, for me, it's like, as long as it teaches the sort of reading, writing, and arithmetic kind of stuff, get that out of the way. But the bottom line is, I was teaching a lot of young people who were disillusioned with schooling and life generally, and I was doing that for about 10 years. And I used to run a little motor project, and and I used to get them to use the laptop, sort of the computer. I used to get them to fix bikes. I used to get them to ride motorcycles around. I was a ACU off-road motorcycle instructor. So, at the end of the day, with education, I think it's a kind of, there is a lot of different type of education out there. That's one point I would say. I suppose the normal grammar stuff, yeah, but I mean, it's quite limited. But for me, I kind of worked in the area of youth work. So basically, I would have said basically that they needed more out of hours projects, to stimulate them and get them interested, and in fact, actually, my motor project, it was run during school hours as well. It was run Monday to Friday, school hours and outside of school hours. So at the end of the day, I thought there was some kids that came to me basically that were ready to pick up tools and start stripping engines down, but they were dyslexic, or they just didn't have any interest in the actual sort of schooling system, So I would have said, it's like there was a kind of a sweet spot there in the UK anyway. In around about, I probably said about 10 years ago, where, Tony Blair had just got in and they put a load of money into youth work. And that was actually translated into a lot of really good projects. And in the area that I did it, the crime rate plummeted, literally. I wasn't working all with kids that had criminal backgrounds, but even so, the crime rate plummeted. And that was actually spread. I was working with kids from all over London, the worst kids, basically, that we could engage with. So basically, it was, there was a lot of good stuff going on to do with, mainly with the youth service, offering the sort of skills that you're on about, Having said that, I mean, because there's different types. You've got Montessori who teach in a certain way, and you've got the key skill stuff they teach in school now. I particularly thought the key skills was kind of a bit of a weird one when I was teaching it. But it did, you did take it made sure everybody knew or touched on each particular thing, but it was kind of very basic education compared to what
say a lot, doesn't it? I mean,
I always found from my experience with school, it was very, very much dependent on the tutor, how I would react to them. Now, there were some tutors that I absolutely loved, and I would sit and I would absorb all day long, and there were other tutors that I could not relate to in this. So could it be that there is possibly people out there in roles where they're teaching youth, they should not be there?
I think absolutely, Jimmy. I can agree with those experiences. It was exactly the same for me. Some teachers just open your book, read from the book. They would mark their homework in the lesson. It was never marked when you got to the lesson. But there are other teachers that had obviously done a lot of preparation for the lesson and put their heart and soul into it, and that made all the difference. But I see we're now coming to the end of the show, and stay tuned, folks, because we've got Doc Rock on shortly, and it's interesting tonight because we've got a cyber Doc. He's away on thespian duties, and he's pre-recorded the show for us to put out, and that should be up at 9 o'clock. If for any chance you don't get it starting immediately after this show, if you just refresh the page, it should come up bang on 9 o'clock. But Jimmy and Shaun, I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us tonight. It's been a fascinating discussion. And,
great, Jimmy. Great, Jimmy and Shaun. Yeah, brilliant.
And I believe you've got just a couple of final things you'd like to bring up before we close, Jimmy or Shaun.
Jimmy, you hit it, mate.
Right, so I'm going to hit this. So I suppose it's the impending arrival of Shaun McGee and Jimmy Hagan on RN, I guess. And so I don't know what to say, but basically we're going to be bringing our show, European News Weekly, to RN in the very, very not too distant future. I'm not quite sure, Shaun, when we're going to actually get around to doing our own 55. I think initially what I'll do probably is I'll just take the stream. I'll get everybody up to speed with a few of our most important pods over the next coming weeks. I know I'm quite busy just at the moment, and it's going to be a little bit hard for another couple of weeks here. So it's going to be hard for me to focus on also doing a show as well. But I think within about maybe 3 or 4 weeks. What do you reckon, Shaun? Do you think that?
No, it could be in that sort of time frame. Yeah, we've got a little bit of planning to do in productions and things. We're going to try and up our game a bit. I think that's the idea.
Well, this is it, So stay tuned. So new show for RN basically. That's basically what Andy's hitting at there. So we'll be joining you, I'd say, over the next week or two. Maybe next week. But we won't be going live just quite yet. But we need a little bit of time just to get organised and find out.
That would be great, Jimmy.
We've done a lot of podcasts which we've put up on European News Weekly. .wordpress.com.
I think we'll probably get them up on our website as well as a sort of preview to what people expect when you come on your show. But that is fantastic news.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to you joining us.
Put a few of them up on your server just so that you can that the listeners can sort of see what we've done already and give them an idea of what we're up to maybe in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I've no doubt. We've got a good few really good shows still left in us. Do you think, Shaun?
We've got some really interesting sort of. I mean, in terms of the sort of interviews that we want to do, it's kind of in terms of alternative democracy, alternative finance or science-based stuff. Corporate activist news. So we've got quite a wide range of remits. And if you were to go to, we also got Arclight 2011 on YouTube, and we put a few a few of our podcasts up on YouTube there, just in case people prefer that format. And that should link. We've started doing articles alongside our podcasts for people to share if they prefer that format. A quicker read or a snippet from an article, they can just cut and paste away from the European News Weekly.wordpress.com website. So, we're hoping to build it up, and we're very intrigued at what you guys are doing. We're keeping a beady eye on you.
We
have.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Shaun and Jimmy, and thank you, Jason, and thank you to everyone for listening, because As I always say, without you, we'd be just talking to ourselves. We'll be back Tuesday night with Paul, our high-level financial and geopolitical insider. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his latest updates. And with that, I'd like to bid you all good night. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Good night.
Good luck.